How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and I'm always excited to break down the latest in Mets land in this big Mets update segment, that being March 15th, 2025, because not only are we going to get into the key takeaways from the Mets' latest loss this spring to the Washington Nationals, headlined by Clay Holmes and Max Kranick, two guys who have dominated this spring, but for the first time yet, actually looked vulnerable, actually looked human. To what degree? How did they fare? Along with key notes on the offensive end from guys like Acuña, Jesse Winker, and some more. And from there, we will hear the remarks of Clay Holmes and Carlos Mendoza on his latest outing and the Mets opening day starter. How's he feeling now? Again, just a couple weeks away from opening day. From there, we'll get into the latest reporting for the Mets, which has the Mets as one of multiple teams in the mix for a potential trade with the San Diego Padres, because the Padres are still actively scouting said Mets players as well as other teams. What exactly would it take to land the player that we all know very well, which is exactly why you probably clicked on the video by seeing the man on the thumbnail? How likely, unlikely is a trade to happen before opening day? Why would the Padres even do this? And a whole lot more is what we're going to get into right here, right now. So thank you guys so much for smashing that like and subscribe button, as well as letting us know all your key takeaways in the comments down below. And shout out to Anthony DeComo to kickstart today's show as well, because he came out with a great piece, which I implore you guys to check out whenever you get a chance, as it had everything to do with Hayden Senger. If you guys don't know Hayden Senger, he is one of the longest tenured players currently in the Mets organization. He's been in the Mets minor leagues for a number of years. I feel like I see him every single spring, especially since covering the Mets. And Senger, who's known as one of the best defensive catchers in all the minor leagues, is now having a greater opportunity than ever to be the Mets' backup catcher for Luis Torrens to begin the regular season. With Francisco Alvarez out, the Mets have three internal options outside Torrens. That's Jackson Reetz, it's going to be Hayden Senger, and Chris Williams. Reetz has had some pop, in which he had a grand salami that I saw in person there, a line drive salami for that matter there in Port St. Lucie over the past week. Well, Chris Williams has some home run pop as well. Senger's more known for the defensive ability and working best game calling with these pitchers, and that's why the Mets have a certain intrigue with someone like him. But a great story, as the title says it itself, how this is a man in the offseason that's grinding it out and working out Whole Foods just to make ends meet. Not only am I rooting unbelievably hard for Hayden Senger to hear this story, but again, I implore you guys to check it out, because it's a great read. And while I personally would like the Mets to add a MLB-esque veteran as that backup option for Torrens over any of their internal options, I'm not going to be losing sleep at the end of the day, and hopefully what's something that's going to be more of a short-term issue in the case of Alvarez versus long-term. Regardless if the Mets stay in-house, Senger is one of those key pieces that could find himself in that backup spot. Make sure you check out that piece from Anthony DeComo whenever you get a chance to do exactly that. But guys, let's get into, as I mentioned, some of the key takeaways for the Mets and their 4-1 loss that we saw here against the Washington Nationals. And there were a couple of key things that certainly stood out to me, including the following, everybody, and they are as follows, as I'm going to show you right now, especially some key highlights. Again, there weren't too many highlights to show, but we did see a guy like the polar bear and Pete Alonso that you guys can see right there getting an RBI on what was pretty much just on a fielder's choice or so, just legged it out, maybe in an infield single. Regardless, that was the first one. Jesse Winker got the party started as well, that we saw with an opposite field double that ultimately got him all the way to third base, which you'll love to see. Winker's batting like just under 300 with over 800 OPS this spring. And Luis Acuña making a nice web gem that you see right here, making the diving play there, getting the throw just a little outside of Alonso, but still getting the job done. And we love to see that, everybody. So as we break down more on the key takeaways from this one, let's also get into our guy here in Clay Holmes, because on the offensive end, the Mets didn't have too much to show for it, as we know. And that was highlighted by the Mets having guys in WardyNYM coming back there from injury that we know he's dealing with the knee, right knee soreness, as well as the plantar fasciitis, around 80% that we broke down from yesterday's video. Nimmo did not record a hit, but did not get on base once, at least once that we saw with a walk there in the DH spot. Juan Soto was banging second, had a walk, but did not record a hit. Still with a just under 1,400 OPS this spring. He's just ridiculous. Check out yesterday's video in case you haven't already on his insane spring at this point. Alonso with the RBI that we just talked about. Jesse Winker looking good. Torrens didn't have a hit today, but he's been looking solid otherwise. Chris Williams went 1 for 1. He is a catching option as well for the Mets. Tyrone Taylor went 0 for 4 that we saw. Luis Acuña recorded a hit and that nice web gem that I just showed you guys. De Los Santos went 1 for 4 as another guy competing for the infield spot, even though he's very much on the outside looking in. Donovan Walton with an increased likelihood went 0 for 2 that we saw with a pair of walks and a run scored. The lone run scored for the Mets in this one. But when we look at Clay Holmes, everybody, this is where he finally looked human for a change. Fitting how, of course, he gives up runs runs after the Mets just announced him as the opening day starter. All jokes aside, though, Clay Holmes in 4.1 innings gave up 3 hits, 2 earned runs, which I will clarify. The second run was scored after he was already pulled from this game, so bear that in mind, as well as 1 walk and 2 strikeouts. So in the case of Clay Holmes, the velocity still is looking strong. We didn't have any metrics on him today, unfortunately. There was nothing through Baseball Savant. They didn't even have the total tally of pitches that Clay Holmes threw officially through the MLB.com app, so we don't know entirely. But everything that we heard from Clay was good, so there's really nothing to be concerned about there, which is obviously a great thing to see. And to talk more about Clay and his outing, let's hear from both Clay Holmes and Carlos Mendoza on said topic.
Was good today. The sinker had really good movement, and he got up to almost 80 pitches, 77 I think he was. Yeah, this is all new for him, especially when you get to that territory, but that's where he's going to have to get used to it. And it's important for him to get this type of reps now, where, you know, I was talking to him after that outing. It's like he started feeling a little tired at the end, and that's when you're going to have to find a way to keep making pitches and, you know, keep finding ways to get people out. So
I would also like to clarify that, of course, the former heavy Mets killer during his time with the St. Louis Cardinals, before he forgot how to hit even the Mendoza line for a bit, and Paul Diaz, well, he's back, that we saw there this time with the Nationals, and he was the man who scored the first run on Clay Holmes' spring by driving in a runner there with an RBI double. Afterwards, again, another runner came in, batter rather, and scored Diaz, if I'm not mistaken, after Clay Holmes was already pulled from this game. But now let's hear from Clay.
Biggest takeaway from tonight?
Yeah, I feel like, continue to get stronger. I threw 77-ish pitches, something like that, and I think it was good to feel that. I felt the ups felt good. Started to, feel the fatigue there a little bit at the end, but it was good to pitch for that and just, see what your legs, arms feel like that and whatnot. But overall, I thought the stuff was good. Definitely a good step here.
What was the biggest takeaway from tonight?
So as we saw, Clay Holmes is obviously feeling good and excited. He continues to feel strong. He threw 77 pitches, so there we go. We actually found out the clarity right there. And I didn't know that prior, because some of the times when I put up these clips for you guys, I don't listen to them entirely or even watch them at all before I'm actually doing the breakdown with you. That way I have my own genuine reaction. I didn't even see in the title there, continue to get stronger through 77 pitches, something like that. I think it was good to feel that, and that's awesome, because mind you, this is easily the most pitches that Clay Holmes has thrown in his career, right? Even if it's only happening in, say, 4.1 innings of work, you want to see him get ramped up this way, because it hasn't happened since 2018, right? Clay Holmes' last outing out there in which he was chef's kiss. So great to see. I saw it in person myself there in Port St. Lucie, carving up, 8 batters for the Nationals, 8 strikeouts over like 3.1 innings. I think he had 3 or 4 walks, but still other than that, he was really strong. And Holmes, we saw, threw 65 to 68 pitches that day, far and away the most he's thrown since being back as a starter in Pittsburgh in 2018, and now he's doing that and then some, which is great to see. But as we know, Clay Holmes, while he wasn't his absolute best this spring, wasn't a liability either, but our guy Max Kranick, who we absolutely love, did have a level of struggle that we saw today, as Max Kranick, for the first time this spring, gave up some runs too. In 1.1 innings, gave up 3 hits, 2 earned runs, 1 walk, and a pair of strikeouts that we saw for Kranick, who still has a sub-2 ERA on the year in this spring training. I think everything is still completely in line for Kranick to obviously crack this Mets roster and crack this bullpen to begin the year, regardless on what was going to be happening in an outing like today. And unless something really changes where he completely falls off a cliff, there's a great reality where Max Kranick is absolutely going to be in this Mets bullpen. They're very bullish on what they're getting from Max right now. The velocity looks great. The off-speed and breaking pitches are intriguing them, and his ability to be utilized as a multi-aim reliever, a guy that they can even stretch if they really wanted to, as he's a former starter, but obviously they're not stretching him right now for a reason. I think this was also a good test for Kranick to face some adversity, unlike what he's faced previously so far this spring, in the sense that, if a guy goes smooth sailing all spring training, it might hit him harder when he gets rocked for the first time throughout the regular season. So these are never things I'm going to be discouraged by, as long as it's not something that's going to be constantly repeating itself, the same way that Jose Urena, again, was batting practice in that game that I saw in West Palm a couple of days ago, giving up doubles galore, and then today, he's carving up the Nats without a problem, giving us 1 scoreless inning. Now his ERA is down to 19.29. I understand, too, he's probably facing some lesser batters for the Nats today because the final inning or so, but still encouraged to see Jose Urena, who will, in fact, be eating innings for the Mets this year. He posted a sub-3 ERA rate, 64 2/3 innings as a reliever that we saw, and as a starter, swingman type was solid for the Rangers last year, even with the expected numbers not favoring him and trying to induce those ground ball outs. Again, a guy in Urena, we're just going to have to hope he works. He got a lot of late movement. There's exciting aspects to his arsenal, but the big thing about Urena is on a minor league contract. Is he going to crack this team out of camp? Not necessarily true, but it doesn't mean they won't be positively impacting, say, their bullpen shortly into the regular season. And a guy who will be positively impacting this Mets bullpen all throughout the course of this season that we're all very excited about is Mr. AJ Minter. And AJ Minter, guys, gave the Mets a scrolls outing that we saw of one inning, 1 hit allowed, and that was it. AJ continues what is, in my opinion, a very, very impressive spring for him thus far. And I'm going to play that Carlos Mendoza clip for you guys in a second that he was talking about pregame today on the case of Edwin Diaz, among others. But AJ Minter, again, I thought he continues to look very good. He looked fantastic. Had a nice 1-2-3 inning a couple days ago that we saw my final day there in Port St. Lucie area before flying back in that loss against the Red Sox, if I'm not mistaken, or if it was the day before, one of the two. Regardless, though, Minter continues to look very solid, and he's a guy that, whether he's going to be starting the year in the Mets bullpen or starting, say, a couple days late because they want to slow roll things with him coming back from that hip surgery, regardless on what the Mets are going to do, AJ Minter will be locked and loaded and ready, and I'm intrigued to see more on the velocity uptick because we know that's been a little down so far this spring as he's first getting ramped up, where we weren't able to really get any metrics on him and his velocity today too because there was nothing documented through Baseball Savant, among other things. So you get what you get and you don't be upset. It is what it is, and that's fine. But what's also fine is that when AJ Minter is in this bullpen, whether it's to begin the regular season, a weekend of the season, this is a guy that you brought in as one of the true best high leverage arms possible, especially as a setup man for Edwin Diaz. To have a true lethal lefty option in this bullpen, potentially with the highest upside that we've seen outside of guys like Brooks Raley and Aaron Lookin in recent years, but a guy that you really have comfortability where you expect him to be in high leverage in setup situations and not in a guy in a loop where you had to be very crafty in his lefty-lefty matchups, and he used him as a spot starter at times against the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2021. If you know, you know. I know because I was in attendance for some of those games when Luis Rojas was manager. Oh my goodness gracious, a lot has happened since Steve Cohen has become the Mets owner, if you guys couldn't tell. But AJ Minter, excited to see more of him this spring training. That goes without saying. But guys, now let's get into the key reporting that I know you guys are very intrigued to get into on the topic of the Padres scouting the Mets. But let's first hear quick remarks from Carlos Mendoza on what's happening with Edwin.
Diaz on the list to throw today?
Yeah, he threw in the minor leagues.
Okay, so that
Yeah.
got switched up.
I don't know if it was originally. Yeah, so Stanek threw, Danny Young, Diaz. So they all threw in the minor league game today. So he was up to 97. So, you know, that was good to see. He continues to say he feels good. So no issues there.
So good news for Edwin Diaz. Everything continues to trend upward, and that's obviously encouraging to see. We know the velocity was a little down in his last outing, especially on the slider. Having even some people thinking that, is he throwing a sweeper now? Like, is this a different slider altogether? When in reality, it really wasn't. He was just kind of throwing it softer than he usually does as he's getting ramped up this spring training still, but nothing but positive signs, hopefully, for Edwin Diaz thus far. But now let's get into the key report here that many of you guys saw earlier today from my guy in Pat Ragazzo. Pat continues to do a very good, respectable job there on the beat for the Mets. Shout out to him. Happy to have him back on the platform whenever he wants to come on. But Pat here says the following: due to Dylan Cease's interest, the Padres have had scouts on the Mets, Yanks, Jays, Sox, Orioles, Rays, Cubs, and a team that had yet to be revealed in the Philadelphia Phillies this spring, per league sources. So we know the Phillies are showing interest in Cease, in which I say buzz off, get out of here. And the simple reason why is because the Phillies already landed Jesus Luzardo this spring. I don't want to see any more nonsense about them bringing in yet another key starter to add to a rotation that already has Zach Wheeler, that already has Ranger Suarez, that already has Aaron Nola, that already has Christopher Sanchez, that already has Jesus Luzardo, that's already one of the better 1 through 5s in all the National League, let alone Major League Baseball, and you're telling me the Phillies want to add more? I guess I understand it, because if the Phillies are not able to maybe part ways with some key guys on the offensive end and have some dead weight there, they want to really bolster that rotation and maximize it. If they're going to maybe be up and down Jekyll and Hyde on the offense, they want to compensate with the rotation. So I can understand that. I obviously hope it doesn't happen, but Listen, we know the Phillies, the Braves especially, because apparently Dylan Cease grew up in Braves country, or at least grew up a Braves-type fan from everything that I heard. They've been heavily linked to Dylan Cease for a period of time, and so have the Mets. Again, we know that the Mets were in plenty of trade talks already this past offseason for Dylan Cease, and for a great reason. As you guys see from all the numbers down below there, Cease in 33 games this past year in roughly 90 innings, a 3.47 ERA, a 3.31 expected ERA, a 3.10 FIP, and a 3.46 SI ERA, just over a 1 whip there. An instant article from Patty goes on to say that obviously while it's unclear as to if a guy like Cease is going to be traded before opening day or not, the talks are still happening because the Padres are still going out of their way to be scouting with these respective teams this spring training. And I think that's notable, especially in case of the Mets, because not only have they had this long-lasting connection, but we know that even Dylan Cease, who spoke to the media over the past day and said that, he's not foreign to this. He's ready and prepared for anything. He would like to stay in San Diego, but he knows that this is a business, not his first rodeo. And this time last year, he was traded from the White Sox to the San Diego Padres and right in the heart of spring training. So it's not like it can't happen. And there's a reality where Cease is still parted with before the regular season begins, because the Padres have to maximize the opportunity there for a guy that they know they're not going to resign after this year. Padres have no dollars that they're working with. They don't have a TV deal right now either. They're in complete flux when it comes to their ownership. That 91-page lawsuit actively going on at the time recording this one still, if I'm not mistaken. Things could be better in Slam Diego when it comes to actually allocating and spending dollars properly, which is why they need Michael King to help them with taking lesser money this year with a better option for 2025, even though he's probably going to opt out and get a bigger payday regardless, for 2026 rather. And then we saw them sign Nick Pivetta to like a 3-4 year deal, but that's because he's also on only $1 million of a base salary, including $3 million in bonus or so for 2025. So again, pennies, because all these contracts are backloaded. Needless to say, the Padres don't have money, and they would like to maximize opportunity if it is in fact going to be best for the organization. So in the case of Cease, who's still an ace caliber, at least a 1 through 3 for pretty much any team in the game right now for your rotation. And we saw what happened with Garrett Cole and the Yankees, which again, I don't wish on anybody, but it's far from shocking. We knew that they were just pushing the inevitable with Cole's injury that he sustained last year, as is with the partially torn UCL. So when we found out that news, same time, same place as last year, not surprising, but now you can expect the Yankees to be at least dabbling in the trade market for a key starter. I know Carlos Carrasco's impressing them this spring, so he's a key candidate for that rotation. Just, again, don't remind Yanks fans that their own fandom had someone go out of their way to try to mock the Mets for having Clay Holmes begin the year as their supposed 4-starter, when in reality, Clay Holmes is our number 1 to begin the year, technically, pitching opening day. But going back, getting off that side tangent, let's talk about Dylan Cease and how this still makes sense for the Mets. And it makes sense on the simple front of Clay Holmes is your number 1 right now, right? You got David Peterson, Kodai Senga, which are still health uncertainty to a certain degree with Kodai Senga that we broke down in yesterday's video as to how much innings he's going to give us this year, how stretched out he's going to be, how healthy he's going to be. There's a lot of uncertainty. And then your 4, 5, 6 is Candy, McGill, Blackburn, maybe in that order, maybe a little bit different. They've all looked good this spring, which has been great over the latest outings. But still, who would not want a Dylan Cease in this rotation over the Mets, where if they're one more injury down, we're really slim pickings here. Then it's like, okay, how fast is Brandon Sproto, Nolan McLean, and Jonathan going to take, right? And speaking of Jonathan, he will be the key starter beginning tomorrow's Mets spring breakout game, if I'm not mistaken, and we will have coverage for you guys after said game here on the platform in either a post-game setting or an updates video like what we're doing right here, right now. But for Cease, obviously he's a hot commodity. Obviously, a lot of teams are seeking him at the moment, but obviously it's also tough to swing a trade before opening day. So I'll have to see it to believe it in the case of that actually happening for the Mets. Do I think it can happen? Yes. Do I think the Mets have the pieces to make it happen? Yes. Do I think the Mets want to trade any other key prospects, especially in the pitching front for Cease? No. I don't think the Mets are going to sniff any of the Sproats, the McLeans, the Tons of the world in a trade for Dylan Cease. I think they'd be more inclined to the position player front, and I think the Mets have more of an abundance of any infield options with the Acuñas, the Mauricios, who will get at bats before spring training's done. More than likely, fingers crossed on that front, everybody, as they're slow rolling things with him. Jet Williams, obviously. There's so many to choose from the Mets infield options, especially up the middle right now. And that could benefit the Padres, who, especially after losing Ha-Seong Kim, if Jose Iglesias is a short-term option, how crazy it would be if the Mets actually traded, one of those guys that we just mentioned to the Padres, and then Jose Iglesias is kind of being the mentor there when he was supposed to be that here, in my humble opinion. Would be bananas if it were to happen, but We'll see to believe it on the topic of Dylan Cease if a trade is going to happen, but definitely something to continue to keep an eye on if they're going out of their way to scout the Mets, along with some other key teams that have been in active trade negotiation or have had at least preliminary talks with the Padres on Cease and Kane, among others, this past offseason. But Mets fans, that is going to do it for our latest Big Mets update segment. Thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did, in fact, enjoy this segment, please make sure to smash that like and subscribe on your way out. Let me know in the comments down below, are you in favor or against the Dylan Cease trade happening before opening day? Do you expect to see it the way that it somehow, some way happened between the White Sox and the Padres in the heart of spring training last year? Or are we going to see it happen at earliest sometime around the trade deadline? Should it happen? Whatever your thoughts are on the Mets' key takeaways and guys in AJ Minter, Clay Holmes, Max Kranick, Luis Angel Acuña, and everything else that we highlighted, let's hear in the comments down below. Thank you guys all so much for watching. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.